Hey, this is Mike from the Run Testers, and in this video we are going to give you our multi-tester take on whether you should go for the Garmin Epix Pro over the Garmin Epix Gen 2. Okay, so let's start with price, and we'll throw up some of the kind of key figures that you need to know about these two watches. But ultimately, what generally happens when a new Garmin watch comes out, the other one should go down a little bit in price. Now, that might not happen necessarily very quickly on kind of buying directly through Garmin, but for other retailers you're probably going to see a change in a little bit in terms of the pricing. But ultimately, these are two still very expensive watches to own, and that's not going to really change, at least in the short term. Now, in terms of design differences, the big one being is that the Epix Pro now comes in 3 case sizes, whereas the original Epix Gen 2 only comes in that 47mm case option, and that ultimately is not going to change. Now, the other thing is we're seeing on the Epix Pro that you're not going to get on the Gen 2 is the LED flashlight, and that sits at the top of the case. So that's not something that Garmin can ultimately add to the Epix Gen 2. So if that's something that you like the idea of, and obviously that wasn't available in the original Epix, then that might be a reason, or that might be a reason or thing that will appeal to you on the Epix Pro. The other thing to mention here as well is that you're getting an upgraded heart rate sensor. So again, this isn't something that Garmin is going to be able to put or change on the original Garmin Epix Gen 2, and this promises improved tracking when you are tracking particularly exercise. In terms of other things, obviously you are getting those bigger case sizes. The 42 and 47mm Epix Pro feel very similar in terms that you're getting characteristics wise on the 47mm Garmin Epix Gen 2. Now, on the bigger 51mm Epix Pro, obviously you're getting a bigger case, bigger screen size, something more on par with what we got on the Phoenix 7X. So from that point of view, you are going to get something that lives a bit bigger on your wrist as well. Elsewhere, the straps relatively stay the same in terms of styling, in terms of the mechanisms to kind of take them off, in terms of the level of waterproofing, the buttons, touchscreen displays, having AMOLEDs, that mix of touch and kind of button use to kind of interact with the displays, those all are kind of similar across the watches. So really the big difference here, or differences between these two watches, are that LED flashlight, that obviously the 3 case size options that you do now have as well, and that upgraded heart rate sensor too. So into the software, and we do know there's a lot of things that are going to roll back to the original Garmin Epix Gen 2. We'll try and do our best to kind of pinpoint what those things are. We don't know when they will be, but over time these are things that are going to go back to the Garmin Epix Gen 2. So we're looking at things like improvements in terms of mapping, so relief shading, the kind of weather overlays on maps. We're also looking at things like the kind of redshift mode, which kind of turns the entire screen red, so it's basically kind of improve using it at night, and kind of being less of a distraction when you are asleep as well. We're also obviously talking about things like the new hill score and the endurance score. So a hill score is something that tries to give you a better gauge, a better sense of how well you can tackle hills. So if you're trying to kind of prepare for a hilly race, then this is designed to kind of help you do that, or give you a sense of whether you've done enough hill training to kind of tackle that, or have the level of strength to kind of tackle a hilly course as well. Endurance score obviously is to do with your ability to kind of perform over a kind of sustained period, and looks at things like VO2 max and historical data to better understand that. So those are some software things that are currently unique to the Garmin Epix Pro, but will in some capacity at some point will roll back to the Garmin Epix Gen 2 as well. And then a quick note on battery life, because obviously now that we have 3 case sizes compared to the 1 case size on the original Garmin Epix, we are seeing some changes in terms of the battery life promises made by Garmin. Now, if we compare the 47mm Garmin Epix Pro to the original 47mm Garmin Epix, then the battery numbers pretty much identical. When you jump up to that 51mm Garmin Epix Pro, however, you are seeing some improvements in terms of the battery life that you should get with the screen set to always on, and also when you're just using the raise to wake gesture. So ultimately right now that you have those extra case sizes, particularly with a 51mm case on the Garmin Epix Pro, you are seeing a promise of bigger battery life compared to what we got on the Garmin Epix Gen 2.
So I used the Epix 2 as my main running watch for most of last year. I was a huge fan of it when it came out, loved the AMOLED screen and having all of Garmin's best features in an AMOLED watch. And I've also really enjoyed using the Epix Pro over the last month. I've been testing both the 47mm model and the larger 51mm model. And there are some big differences there that we'll come on to talking about. But for the most part, the experience of using the Epix 2 and the Epix Pro is very similar. Like the key stuff is the same across both watches. The GPS accuracy is top notch on both of them. Sports tracking, the training analysis. There are a couple of new bits on the Epix Pro, but they are coming to the Epix 2 and they're not really as exciting as the training analysis that's already there, like readiness and that kind of thing. So there are obvious hardware upgrades on the Epix Pro. The flashlight is a useful thing to have, and when you're not using it, it's completely unobtrusive, not noticeable. So it is just a clear upgrade. It's just how much you're going to use it. I personally don't get a lot of use out of it. It wouldn't be a reason for me to get it over the older watch, but for some people, it might be a more compelling thing. And then the heart rate monitor is an improvement. So with the Epix 2 last year, I found it performed more or less like most optical heart rate monitors, which is to say it was largely okay, but I was having fairly regular errors, sometimes sustained errors in heart rate reading that would skew the training analysis of an individual run or my overall monthly training analysis. So I paired a chest strap to it quite quickly. With the Epix Pro, I've used these for a month now and really has been very few errors from them. It's been very impressive actually. I think like a handful of errors across the two watches whilst testing them on runs, and those errors haven't really been sustained either. Like they might jump a little bit high at the start of a run or be late to an interval, like lag behind a chest strap, or sometimes miss an interval entirely. So they're noticeable errors, but they're not really annoying ones. Like sometimes when the Epix 2 might just get my heart rate entirely wrong for 20 minutes on a run, it completely changes how that run is framed within Garmin's training analysis. If you're trying to train by heart rate, it's very annoying, and the Epix Pro is a significant improvement. That said, I would probably still pair a chest strap to it because there are still errors there, and to trust it entirely, I'd probably want the chest strap readings going in, which would mean it's a wash between both watches because obviously they're both paired to chest straps. But it is definitely an improvement on a new watch. I've definitely noticed that. And then probably the biggest thing I've noticed a difference is with the 51mm model Epix Pro, it's the battery life. Like having this larger watch really does increase the battery life. It doubles it essentially. So the Epix 2 and the Epix Pro 47mm last me like 5 days on a charge with the always on screen enabled running every day, whereas the Epix Pro 51mm will last me 10 days. And if you start using the raise to wake feature, then you really are going to get weeks of battery life out of it. It's a bigger watch, a more expensive watch, and a less comfortable one to wear all the time if you have thin wrists like me, but the upgrade in battery life is very noticeable, and for an AMOLED watch, it's very striking. You've now got an AMOLED watch that has a battery life that really is not far off being equivalent to things like the Phoenix range, and that will be a very attractive option. But yeah, overall, the nuts and bolts of everyday tracking, I think, are very similar between the two watches. Got some small upgrades on the Epix Pro, but I think the really interesting thing is maybe the battery life on the 51mm model. That's the only thing that might make me pause and think about upgrading.
So into that run test, and I have used the Garmin Epix Gen 2 long term pretty much since it launched last year. I've used it for pretty much all my runs, all my non-running activities. I've raced with it, I've run marathons with it as well. So it's a watch that I've tested pretty much to its limits. Now in terms of my experience using the Garmin Epix Pro more recently, and now I've had these watches in both the same size as well, so it's been a good way to kind of compare how these watches kind of perform in terms of run tracking, in terms of day-to-day use. I would say there's not a huge amount in it for me personally, and that includes the kind of hardware and software things that you're getting on the Garmin Epix Pro. So I'll start with in terms of just generally day-to-day using it. Size-wise, not that different. I think it's not a super heavy watch. I think it's a good size of 47mm case. The design wise, it hasn't really changed that much. You do have that LED flashlight. As I said in our full review, I have quite liked it. I do see the appeal of having it on a watch, particularly if you run a lot alone at night. It does feel bright enough to be a useful source of light, but ultimately most of my runs are during the day. Right now I haven't massively needed it or massively felt that I would miss it if I went back to the Garmin Epix Gen 2. For my kind of run tracking performance, it's been near identical. I used both in the multiband, kind of top end multiband, multi-frequency modes in terms of GPS. The performance has been very, very good on both these watches. I haven't seen a massive improvement in terms of what I've seen on the Garmin Epix Pro compared to the Epix Gen 2. In terms of that heart rate and in terms of that improved or promised improved heart rate sensor and accuracy, I haven't really seen enough to suggest that there's enough there for me to say, well, actually, I could rely on the Epix Pro sensor and ditch a heart rate monitor chest strap. I just wouldn't do that. And because so many of the features and training features are built on really good heart rate, whether it's VO2 max or any kind of heart rate measurements as well, I would not be dropping using a heart rate monitor chest strap, and I don't think that really changes with the Garmin Epix Pro, and it's the same with the Garmin Epix Gen 2 as well. Battery life, again, I think it's very similar in terms of what I've experienced. I think I generally tend to use it with the raise to wake, and I kind of don't need the always on display mode, but when I have, I think the battery life drop off is about the same. Maybe you're getting a little bit more on the Epix Pro, but I don't think there's a massive amount in it. These are watches that can last you comfortably a week if you're doing a regular amount of training, and I think in terms of what you're getting in both these watches, battery life is very, very similar from that point of view. Using them outside of tracking things like smartwatch features, generally getting around the navigating the menus and things like that, it's identical. That's really what we see generally in terms of those kind of pro models and the non-pro models when we've seen with the Phoenix, and when Garmin has done it with the Phoenix models, they've added some features, and I think obviously you've got that kind of hill score, endurance score, there's kind of mapping extras, which I do like. I think they're nice. Those are going to come to the Epix Gen 2, and when I know that that's going to be the case, then it's not things I'm thinking I'm going to massively miss out on if I just stuck with the older watch ultimately. So for me, in terms of my kind of run testing experience, I felt that it's been very, very similar in terms of what I've experienced in the Garmin Epix Gen 2, mainly from that kind of day-to-day use, what you're getting in terms of the screen, the design, the level of comfort you're getting, the battery life, the run tracking that you're getting, the level of data. Yes, you're getting those extras in terms of hill scores and endurance scores, but in terms of how I use the watches and the level of analysis that you're already getting without those features and scores, I think the Garmin Epix Gen 2 still offers a lot ultimately, and it's going to get those features as well at some point too. It's just obviously you're getting a little bit better packaged on the Garmin Epix Pro at the moment. So for me, in terms of my run tracking experience, it's been very similar in my experience outside of those extra hardware features, which I don't think are groundbreaking features or features that necessarily I think really dramatically change the experience, unless you are someone that runs a lot at night and you really need that flashlight, because for me the heart rate sensor just doesn't offer enough boost in accuracy to warrant jumping from that to the from the Garmin Epix Pro from the Garmin Epix Gen 2. So my verdict on whether you should go for the Garmin Epix Gen 2 over the Epix Pro, it really boils down to one thing for me only really, and that is the flashlight. If you really care about the flashlight, that is really something you are desperate to have, and it is good and it's well integrated in the Pro, then you're not going to get that on the Garmin Epix Gen 2, and that would be the main reason to go for this watch over the older Gen 2. Outside of that, a lot of the software features don't feel big enough for me, particularly when you know that they're likely are going to be rolling down to the Epix Gen 2 as well at some point. Probably won't be long before you're getting those as well. In terms of overall performance, feels identical to me, whether it's run tracking, the battery life, what you're getting day to day from all the other features as well, whether you're using it as a smartwatch or you're using it as a fitness tracker as well. There's just not enough, there's not enough in it for me, I would say, to say that it's a worthy upgrade or a desperate upgrade. As I said, it really boils down for me whether you want that flashlight. If you don't want it, get the Epix Gen 2. If you do want it, if you want that upgraded heart rate sensor, which I didn't really see the massive gains for me personally in my testing, then that might be another reason to go for it. But just be mindful of the fact that a lot of the software features are going to roll back here to Garmin Epix Gen 2. And if it was me and I could pick up the Gen 2 for less, I'd be getting this. I might be looking at the flashlight thinking, no, that'd be quite nice to have, but I wouldn't be thinking, well, I should have paid more for it, because ultimately I think the Epix Gen 2 is still a great watch. Still gives you that strong run tracking experience that you're getting on the Epix Pro with a few extras that ultimately I don't think are massive deal breakers for me.
So my verdict is that you've got very similar watches here with the Epix 2 and the Epix Pro, and they're very good watches. And I think if you already have an Epix 2, I wouldn't go and upgrade to the Epix Pro. I think it's a pretty marginal update. You're getting those software features anyway, and the flashlight's nice. The improved heart rate tracking is nice, but unless you have a very clear idea that those things are going to be game changers for you. There's not a big reason to jump on and upgrade to the new watch. Same goes if you're looking at buying one of these, from scratch. If you're choosing between them to buy, the Epix 2 is going to be a lot cheaper, and I would try and get a Sapphire model to make sure you get the multi-band GPS, because I do think that is really impressive on the watches, and I love a very accurate GPS, and I do think it makes a big difference. But if you're going to get a good deal on the Epix 2, again, I think it's the smarter pick, because the watches are so similar in their day-to-day experience. The one caveat to that is the 51mm model, where you are getting that big upgrade in battery life, and that is a bit of a game changer for an AMOLED watch. So if you are happy to spend the money, get the bigger watch, wear the bigger watch. It is a bit heavier. I'd use a nylon strap if I were using the bigger one myself. You can get them off eBay very cheaply. I used a nylon strap with it from eBay. Then that is a slightly different matter. I would say that is a big upgrade from the Epix 2. To get double the battery life out of an AMOLED screen is quite important. Same time, if you're happy charging every 5 days instead of every 10, then again, the experience with the Epix 2 is fantastic. I would have no hesitation recommending that watch. I'd also say, as a little side note on that battery life, is if you already have an Epix 2 and we're thinking about upgrading, then I would maybe wait, because I think battery life is moving really fast with AMOLED watches. Like, this is, like I said, a big upgrade on what we saw from just last year from Garmin and its AMOLED watches. I think over the next year or two, we're going to start seeing AMOLED watches that really do last even longer than this, and maybe hopefully smaller ones as well. So that would be a reason to wait on it and see what maybe next year's Epix or the year after Epix is going to be. And this isn't a huge upgrade cycle from Garmin, I put it that way. They've introduced new sizes, they've got the flashlights, better heart rate monitoring, better battery on the larger model. It's one I think it'd be worth waiting and seeing on. And I think, maybe a couple of years down the line, you're going to see Epix models of all sizes with very long battery lives. So that might be a reason to stick with the cheaper, older Epix 2 for now and see what you get in a couple of years. Really, looking at any which way, I do think the Epix 2 is the smarter pickup just now. The experience of using it is fantastic. But if right now you want the very best AMOLED sports watch you can get, it's the Epix Pro 51mm in my opinion, because that battery life is so good.
Okay, so there you have it. That is our take on how the Garmin Epix Pro compares to the Garmin Epix Gen 2. Now, if you've got any questions about these two watches or any other features that you'd like to know about how they compare, do let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out about our latest videos, and yeah, we'll see you in the next Run Testers video.